in the tradition of Malcolm X. Peace be unto you. My observations make it clear to me that if we take our society, our social structures, particularly our political structures, and we subtract from those structures all of the high technology that has been developed within the last, let us say, 150 years, maybe 200 years. What we have left is a replication of the political models which once existed during the Bronze Age. Nothing in the political sense has changed since the origin of the Bronze Age empires, because those empires were predicated on there being a permanently poor caste of people at the bottom of the social hierarchy, and that they were necessary to drive cycles of wealth growth for the elite at the top of the social pyramid. We should not feel bad because of the position that we are in. That is to say, we should not feel it is because of our lack of capacity to organize ourselves and to better our lives. Because the people who are responsible for our position in society and their descendants have had a great head start on us in every avenue of life. And it will take us much time to catch up, not just educationally, of course, but economically and in other aspects of social life. The fact is, because we still live in a society modeled along Bronze Age political structures, we live on a financial plantation. There are uniformities in nature all around us. And because we are part of nature, there are uniformities in the way that we organize ourselves socially and politically in our attempt to adapt and survive changing conditions in the global environment. But here's something that we may deduce from that idea of uniformities in nature. It is this: the future tends to replicate the past. Let me repeat that. The future tends to replicate the past. That is why it is important to study history. Because what we are experiencing is a replication of past social structures which worked efficiently for a power elite to rule and to enjoy their lives at the expense of masses of people below them in the social hierarchy. Again, let me express my point here. What all that means is that you are living on a plantation and that you are growing wealth for others, just as African people did during the pre-Civil War United States. You may say, well, I'm not doing farm work. I have a job. I'm working for myself. I have a small business. But the fact of the matter is that each of us is tied into a financial network that extorts from us a growing percentage of the income that is the product of our labor. For example, on average, it takes 3 months out of every year of our income, 3 months of our income per year to pay taxes at the federal and state level, not to mention all of the fees that we pay at the city level, at the county level, and at the state level. As we work and we see no results or very few results of our labor, we see other people, particularly white people, on average, living a better life. And that makes us feel that we are being purposefully discriminated against. And that's true. Since the founding of this nation, we have been purposely, intentionally discriminated against. It's in the Constitution. You see, the Constitution is predicated on inequality, not equality, on the unequal distribution of values or wealth in society. And add to that the unequal distribution of wealth and opportunities in society based upon skin color or race. In fact, the Constitution defined the social structure of the United States to be a caste system, not just a class system, a caste system. It was a class system for white people. It was and is a caste system for all others who popularly are defined as people of color, and particularly for American descendants of slaves. For that reason, we suffer what is called in sociology and political science relative deprivation. It is the lack of resources to sustain our diet, our lifestyle, our activities, and other amenities, which society generally encourages everyone to enjoy, but ironically marginalizes millions of people so that they cannot enjoy, because in order for the minority to enjoy their amenities, their lifestyles, it is necessary to have a bottom-tier group of people who feed them the wealth that is generated by their labor. And so African Americans do suffer relative deprivation in the United States, and there is no real solution to that problem because the fundamental assumptions, the fundamental principles which drive the society make it necessary for that kind of relationship between African Americans and the power elite, that make it necessary for that kind of relationship to exist in order for the United States to exist as it was determined to exist when it was founded. We have, as a group, many years to catch up, to close the wealth gap, the education gap, and I would say to you, given all of the changing conditions at the global level, at the macro level, we will not be able to close those gaps. But what we can do successfully, what we can do to increase our aggregate quality of life is work together more closely, beginning at the fundamental level of family life. Despite the discontent that we suffer in the general society. Let's talk about how we generate wealth, how we sustain the lifestyles of all the classes which enjoy their lives more or less above us. For example, let's talk about welfare. First of all, welfare, when it was instituted during the New Deal era, was instituted for white mothers with dependent children. That was the original intent of the welfare system. Just as Social Security excluded domestic workers who were majority African Americans at that time, and agricultural workers who were, of course, majority African Americans doing sharecropping in the South. Those systems were constructed to support white people. And we were the bottom tier people who were to pay into the system, without deriving benefits, of course, to pay into the system to support poor white people. So today, when we look at the figures and we look at how much money is allocated by the government to pay into welfare programs, it amounts to about $851.1 billion a year. And 41% of the recipients today are American descendants of slaves, and 36% of the recipients are Latinos, and that accounts for 77% of the recipients of welfare, which includes unemployment, housing assistance, family and children assistance, workers' compensation, and Medicaid. Now let me put up this diagram because I want you to see how the system works to exploit us at the bottom of the caste hierarchy in this Bronze Age social structure, in this Bronze Age political structure predicated on slavery. We have at the bottom the permanently poor caste, us, and you can see that the money received from the United States Treasury Department, the $851 billion that we receive is paid into the system at the ghetto level. In other words, when you drive around inner city areas where African Americans live, when they receive their checks, because they are trapped in cities where there is lack of transportation, they are forced to pay for goods and services in ghetto stores, which of course charge them more for products like bread and milk and eggs than larger stores where they are more likely to find deals because of the greater competition between products in the stores. So ghetto stores profit from the welfare system, not the people who are trapped in ghetto locations, not the people, but the stores benefit because what the government is actually doing is transferring tax dollars to low-tier markets and using poor black people as conduits, as a pipeline, to feed them money. And that, of course, reflects another level of the financial slave system that we are prisoners of. Those ghetto stores, if you will look at the next diagram, those ghetto stores take the $851 billion and transfer it into banks. They deposit that money into banks, just like the churches do. And since the banks are based upon what is called the fractional reserve banking system, the law allows them to take 90% of that $851 billion and loan it out, as you can see on the next diagram, loan it out to white corporations and businesses and earn interest on those loans. So from the beginning, where the check is issued from the U.S. Treasury Department, transferred to the recipients who are on welfare in its many forms, spent in local ghetto stores, and then banked, the money actually is feeding the wealthy indirectly, taxpayers' dollars, and allowing white corporations and white small businesses in other locations to use the money to build their wealth. And of course, the government is still involved because they tax the income of those businesses and they tax the income of the banks. And so the government actually receives back a percentage of the $841 billion that they disperse to poor people throughout this nation. And so this is what your income has built for the power elite. This is what your wealth has built for them, a lifestyle that allows them to raise families, to educate their children in good colleges, to provide the best vocational training for their children, and to have a life that allows them some recreational activities. They are living in the Emerald City, and you are living in the trash heap of the ghetto, and hundreds of thousands of you are homeless. And so there's your cycle of exploitation. There is your evidence that you are living on a financial plantation that is a replication of the plantations that our ancestors lived on during slavery, before the Civil War. So the ultimate point is that essentially nothing has changed. As I told you a few minutes ago, the future tends to replicate the past. And that is why we are necessarily driven to seek social justice. Because fundamentally, justice is impossible in this kind of exploitative predicament that we are in. And the hard knock reality that we must face is that, given the fact that the system is predicated on injustice, on inequality, your knock on the door for justice will not be answered. There will be no justice forthcoming from the powers that be. And so we must give justice to ourselves by building our own structures, by reconstituting our family structures, and by raising our children to be trained in the sciences and the vocational arts so that we can be competitive as best we can in an environment that is nearly absolutely hostile to us. Because there's also a psychological dimension to the system in which we live, which I will address in another talk. I am Dr. Stephen Nur Ahmed. Peace be unto you.
I really enjoyed this video, and I hope you did as well. If you enjoyed Stephen's talk, please support this channel, thumbs up, and share this video. And please do not forget to subscribe.